is back, and this is the start of a brand new business and markets week in Frontier Africa. This is your Frontier Opening Bell, Monday, the 28th of March. How are we getting started today with the whole weekend spent by a coalition of the willing central banks in US, Canada, and Europe, bailing out, throwing lifelines at Credit Suisse, 166-year-old bank, going into the back pockets of UBS in Switzerland and trying to prevent a contagion of the banking turmoil of Credit Suisse and Silicon Valley Bank, all to the rest of the world. Welcome to the start of another, what may look like a turbulent market week. No thanks again to a number of central bank monetary policy interest rate decisions that we're going to see this week, starting from the US FOMC and then the rest of the African continent. The flag off will be today when Nigeria's central bank starting its two-day monetary policy meeting. You expect the announcement from Godwin Emefiele, the head of the CBN, later tomorrow around lunchtime. But let's look at the markets finishing line for a couple of exchanges that will cover on the continent. The Nigerian market finished 0.04% upside on Friday, but on a weekly basis, the market was down 1.53%. That took our month to date for the month of March to a negative 2.07%, and the year to date around 7%. In Cote d'Ivoire, the BRVM fell 13 basis points on Friday. On Sunday, Egypt started the week in the middle of that. The back look still present, as it were. Silicon Valley, Signature Bank, all that crisis in the US, as well as the Credit Suisse fiasco as well. So the Sunday market was negative, as you can expect, in Egypt, 16 basis point, the EGX30, that is. If you look at the South African market, a very deep dive to around 0.52, 72,527 on Friday, while the Nairobi stock market had a very bloody week. Finishing Friday, a very sharp 3.18% in the red. The NSE All-Share Index is standing precipitously around 100 reading. If the sell-off in the Kenyan market continues this week, as we saw over the last week, plus on the back of Safaricom, despite some strong earnings reported by some of the big banks like KCB and others in Kenya, then the NSE All-Share Index could dip below that triple digits level. Keep that in mind. Let's get on to look at the stories making headlines in West Africa, or East Africa, beg your pardon. The Central Bank of Kenya is looking at about 50 billion shillings in the sale of its government bonds for the month of April, while coffee farmers are expected to start trading on the Nairobi Commodities Exchange on the 10th of April. I would say congratulations to that opening of that coffee farmers coming to trade on the NCE. Anibal Kraga has gotten a second term as the executive secretary of the African Refiners Redistributors Association at the end of their meeting, which was held last week. And Landmark Africa, which is one of the iconic and one of the biggest real estate developers on the African continent, says it's got about $24 million in funding from Shelter Africa, which is headquartered in Nairobi, Kenya. And you have quite a number of African countries as shareholders, with Kenya and Nigeria as the two largest shareholders of Shelter Africa. And Uganda has signed an MOU with South Korean company to build a $9 billion 2,000 megawatts nuclear power plant. That's under President Yoweri Museveni, by the way. Let's get on to West Africa. Talk about the Nigerian Central Bank two-day interest rate meeting starting today. Now, Moody's released late on Friday that's the impact of the Silicon Valley Bank collapse in the US, which no one is ready to buy, at least as at this morning, will likely have very minimal impact on the banks that are under its coverage on the African continent. And the reason is simple. According to Moody's Investor Services, African banks have stronger capital adequacy ratio, they've got liquidity and a strong deposit. And broadly speaking, African banks are not so much correlated. Most of the commercial banks in Africa, not in serious correlation with the rest of developed markets. If you take out South Africa, a couple of names in Egypt and Nigeria and Kenya as well, including Cote d'Ivoire. So the rest of Africa are somewhat insulated in terms of deep relationship with the rest of the developed markets, in globally speaking. And MTN Nigeria is looking to rejig its structure is going to merge its mobile money payment service bank with the yellow digital financial services. We'll get to hear a lot more about this new horizon and why the restructuring is taking place. What's the game that MTN is up to Nigeria when it holds its annual general meeting later next month, in the middle of April. Keep an eye on that. We'll report that for you on Frontier Opening Bell. And of course, talk about the Central Bank Monetary Policy meeting. Let's touch on with Southern Africa was making the headlines this morning. SVB Credit Suisse crisis won't affect South African banks' financial system as well. That's according to Kanyango, the SARB, the Reserve Bank governor in South Africa. That was a statement as we went into the weekend. And Goldfields and Anglo Gold Ashanti says they're ruling out a merger after that mega deal of a joint venture in Ghana. And Zambia is upbeat about a debt relief. That's according to the finance minister, as the deal seemed to be getting delayed, and Zambia is optimistic that the deal could be reached before the end of the first half of the current year between China and its Western countries. Creditors under the G20 Common Framework. Exalo Resources says it's got a final deal despite final dividend despite 41% revenue uptick for last year. And VVEX listed Axia second half 2022 ended December reporting a gross profit margin up 36%. And that's good news for that company. Let's brought in North Africa into the conversation with the Egypt's Prime Minister, Moody, unveiling Mercedes-Benz Logistics Center at a Sokhna port in Egypt. Mercedes-Benz, Rolls-Royce and other big names are doing a whole lot more on the African continent. And Morocco is looking to share its expertise in water management at the 2023 Water Conference organized by the United Nations. That's coming up later this week, March the 22 to the 24th, starting on Wednesday to the end of the week, Friday. And Global Wind Energy Council says wind power can help Morocco to meet its 2030 green energy targets. And finally, domestic food price inflation remains high. That's according to a new report by the World Bank. That was reports came in late on Friday. Keep those headlines in mind. Let's get everyone just calm the nerves as we look at the Credit Suisse crisis in Europe and the contagion that everyone is suspected. We're looking at all of this together, bringing the whole conversation and the global banking to see how Frontier Africa will be faring. That's about it for today. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.